I was so stoked to get that. Oh, hello. What is going on, everybody? Welcome. I'm back again. You get tired of me real quick, but that's okay because it's the first day of the NFL season. You are watching the Awesemo NFL Deeper Dive Showdown Edition. And for the first time ever, not joined on a Sunday Deeper Dive, but joined on a Thursday night Deeper Dive for a showdown. We've got Ben Rasa at JazzRaz DFS. We've got Alex Baker. You may know him as Awesemo himself. I'm Dave Lochran on Twitter at Laffy_D. Hit us up, JazzRaz DFS, at Awesemo DFS, at Laffy_D. And hey, say what's up to our producer, Jordan Klein. This dude's pulling some serious heavy lifting, serious shifts tonight, Ben.
No doubt about it. All hands on deck. Start of the NFL season. We just have showdown content on showdown content, but I couldn't be more excited to be part of this one and to dive into someone's going to win a lot of money tonight. And I hope it's one of us three. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie either. That would be great. And Alex, it's been such a long time since you've done shows with us that you forgot how to join.
Yeah, this is crazy, man. It feels like summer break is over and it's the first day of school. Couldn't be more excited to be on here with you guys.
Well, I'm excited too. And I'm excited to have all of you guys with us as always. If you listen, if you want to feel fulfilled, actually, really, if you just want to help us and you like this content, hit that thumbs up. It helps us greatly. And subscribe to the channel. We're trying to make that push to 60,000 subscribers. Football season's always a good time for us, and hopefully for you as well. Hopefully you enjoy all this stuff. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. First thing you do, I won't ask you, I might ask you again, but I won't ask you for anything other than that, I can assure you. And, you know, this content's free, so quid pro quo, right? Anyway, Ben, I'll kick it off with you. Whenever we do these shows, especially early in the season, I think one of the most important things isn't just to jump right into who the best plays are and whether you want to captain this guy or whether we like, you know, Tom Brady as a 9.5-point favorite against the Cowboys. That line has moved quite considerably too, and we'll talk about it. But more than anything, when it comes to showdown strategy, what are some things that you're looking at? And for people that might be new to showdown or just a little rusty, because showdown, and I talked about this with Mac Kajeski today, so much different for football than it is for basketball. There's actual correlation, and you're not just taking the highest usage guy and plugging him into the captain spot every single night.
No doubt about it. I think the theme that we've all said, and we've echoed this throughout the past couple of seasons when this format existed, is you want to work backwards. You want to tell a story of how you think the game is going to go, and then which players are likely to kind of do that. Now, you're going to have to do some awkward things, and you're going to change it up, and you're trying to beat a lot of people. But I think the theme that I'm just going to throw out to you guys, and then you can take it from there, is you want to tell that story. How is the game going to unfold? And then which players are most likely to be, you know, beneficial in those scenarios?
Yeah, Alex, and, you know, you've been someone that kind of jumped straight in the showdown as soon as they started. I think it was kind of, at first, people would look at these showdown slates, and a lot of people thought they were dumb. I know you remember that. Remember, like with the NBA ones where they had the $1 million in the finals. And by the way, Carlos, when I look to the right, I'm looking at both of them because it's on our production screen. But yeah, you know, you jumped right in this. I think a lot of people were a little bit hesitant and almost overwhelmed by the format. But what is it that you like so much about Showdown, and why have they gotten so damn big?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I was one of those guys when it came out that I was like, I don't know about this, but I think it was because 2-game slates in NFL like sometimes aren't that exciting, but the format change, particularly on DraftKings, in my opinion, like just kind of spiced it up and made it an interesting game. So I think there's a lot of angles. The biggest piece of advice I can give to everyone out there is there's no one size fits all strategy in Showdown. Like, your lineup should look a lot different depending on what kind of contest you're in. So if you're in one of those 500,000 person millionaire makers, you're going to want a much different lineup than if you're in like a 5,000 person tournament.
I was going to ask you that too. I mean, you're going to see less overlap and less dupes in NFL just because there's less, or there's more players. There's more ways to do it, whether it's kickers, defense, you know, backup running backs, fourth, you know, wide receiver fours, you name it, or the tight end that gets one target that goes for a 30-yard touchdown in a low scoring game. How crazy, how contrarian, and how off the reservation. Am I allowed to say that? How off the reservation? I don't know.
First show, you get canceled. Good job.
I don't fucking know anymore, dude. How off the map are you going in these large field tournaments compared to like a single entry, even though some of these single entry contests are big?
Very off the map, because like tonight, 500K people, like if you split it, like, okay, so there is a more limited number of possible lineups you can make in Showdown. So everyone's going to have like very similar lineups, and the most popular ones will have thousands of entries. So I'm really trying to go to a tier of lineups where it's like the individual players might not combine to be the greatest projected lineup, but it's just kind of like a scenario that could play out. Like maybe the kickers outscore some of the higher price guys, etc. And that's kind of how you can start to tell a story.
Yeah. And Ben, before we're going to jump straight into the Cowboys here, but do you go mega wild with these, or do you think there are some spots where you can just go way different, maybe a captain, or do you not want to go crazy different at captain and want to stick with the guys that have that clear high ceiling and the potential to hit that more often than some of these other guys that just super low salary and it's just a hope and a prayer?
Like everything, I think there's a fine line. Certainly, if you're building in a large field tournament and you're coming close to 50K, it's hard to imagine that you're going to have a unique lineup and you're not going to be duped by a lot of people. But I do think there's an underutilized strategy in Showdown. We're going to get into it tonight, where you actually can target the same players, but the permutation of who you have at captain can leverage within your lineup. So a lot of people have someone really popular at utility and maybe you use them at captain, or the other way, you know, they're the obvious captain choice. You have them in your lineup so you secure some of the floor, but you hope they just don't go crazy. And then you set yourself up. Maybe you have a low owned captain and that could make the difference. So that's something I'm going to explore tonight.
All right. And we will take a look at ownership as well. So as we do so, though, I want to dive straight into the Cowboys. And as you guys come into the room, what's up? Glad to have you here. Hit that thumbs up while you're at it. The Cowboys, Alex, and this is kind of crazy. If you look, this spread actually opened at 6.5, and we're in some spots, we're at 9.5 now, which is pretty remarkable that you've seen a 3-point swing in this game. The totals jumped from 51.5, 52.5, nothing crazy. The Cowboys have a 21.5 point implied total now. So there's still, with a showdown slate, a lot of times it doesn't matter. Sure, we could go Bucs onslaught, no question. But do you think, and I guess how much are you playing for this game to be a shootout?
Yeah, I think that could be a potential trap, is playing for the shootout, because everyone, when they're building their lineup, kind of pictures this high scoring game where like you're going to need like 20 points out of every player to win. But a lot of the edge can be, okay, imagine this game like it's kind of a bad football game and it's like 15-9 or something. And then the winning lineup's going to look a lot different. So you want to be like kind of trying to anticipate like all the different things that could happen. Like maybe it's a shootout, but even like the most high paced teams, like sometimes just kind of like fizzle out into a boring football game.
Yeah. And Ben, I don't necessarily see this. Of course, you, like you said, you kind of have to play it to your own story, to your own narrative. I don't necessarily see this being a slog fest. And while I do think Dallas made some adjustments, look, they're bringing 8 new starters on from last year. So on defense, I'm sorry. I still think this defense is going to be below average. I don't know if you can be quite as bad as you were last season. You bring in Micah Parsons. I think the run game will be slightly improved because you can't allow 160 rushing yards per game in back-to-back seasons, but you could still be bad here. And I don't know if the corners are going to be able to hold up against Brady. Do you see this being a spot where you could have some legitimate Bucs onslaught lineups, or going with maybe heavy running back lineups? What do you think?
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I think a Bucs onslaught will be a pretty popular narrative considering this spread is moving wildly. The Bucs are the team most people expect to win, and they're a team I expect to win. I think probably the leverage strategy is Cowboys onslaught 5-1. That's something when you look at the dynamics of most people's lineups, it's going to have an even balance, 3-3, 4-2. You go 5-1, you really rev it up and you get away from a lot of those teams. So you got to look to things like that. You got to look to little edges. And yeah, I think one of the main storylines, Cowboys defense was horrendously bad, 30th in the league in rushing yards allowed per attempt at 5 per rush. That is just awful. They have to improve that. And then it's going to be, pick your poison. The Bucs have every weapon imaginable on offense. So a lot to break down there, but the Cowboys defense is one of the major themes here.
Another thing to consider too, Ben, when you're looking at like a Bucs onslaught, it could definitely happen. There's much higher likelihood than a Cowboys onslaught, right? Or paying off. But the one thing here that has me at least scratching my head a little bit is the Bucs have so many weapons, right? Like, could Gio Bernard catch a touchdown today? Could it be, Evans, Godwin, and Brown are all spread out in terms of opportunity? Like, the highest target share on the team last year was Mike Evans at 18%. Sure, Brady throws a lot, so you have to add context to that. Like, there's Gronkowski as well, who over the last 10 weeks of the season was the tight end 5. You've got OJ Howard back. They have a lot of potential mouths to feed in this offense.
No doubt about it. They're a well-rounded, good team that's really going to be able to spread the ball around. They're not going to hone in on one guy. I kind of like that for Showdown, because if you can get the right Buccaneer, particularly a captain, if you go that route, it could really separate you. But there's no doubt people are going to load up on Tampa with Brady and a bunch of his pass catchers. That's going to be one of the most popular builds tonight.
All right, let's get into the weeds a little bit here, Alex. And we will give you our top props, our favorite bets for today. And you know what? We'll throw a little lineup build in as well. We'll do like a large field tournament build and just kind of go wild with it. And if you have any questions, throw them in chat. If we can get to them, we certainly will. If you got the badge, always going to prioritize that because you are a member of the YouTube channel and we appreciate you. We love you. All right. So I want to start with the run game. Ezekiel Elliott. You're not going to get this guy at a discount by any stretch, right? If you're playing Ezekiel Elliott, you're playing him against what was the number 1 ranked rush defense, according to Football Outsiders DVOA last year. And he's the highest priced skill player. So outside of the running backs, Ezekiel Elliott is the highest priced player on DraftKings and on Fanduel. He's up there as well.
Yeah, and I don't think he really deserves to be the highest priced guy because of the tough run defense mostly, where I feel like Dallas, being a big underdog, is going to have to throw a lot. That's going to make the receivers pop more than Elliott. And then on Tampa Bay, there's a lot of great options too. So the one question mark with Ezekiel Elliott that I'm really looking forward to getting answered tonight is last year, Tony Pollard kind of rotated in on third downs, started taking a little bit of that workhorse role away from Zeke. And that's kind of what I'm expecting this year, him not to be quite as good as he was 2 years ago. Kind of lost season though last year with Dallas. So it's a little bit hard to know what they're planning to do here.
I actually know that Ben agrees with you for the most part there. So my thing is, just to be clear, Ezekiel Elliott played 15 games last year. You project that out 16 games. We would have had 337 looks. Okay. That's still a lot, right? Like, you're still talking about on a team that was bad, that trailed a lot, that had to resort to the pass game. Ezekiel Elliott was pretty much pacing 260 carries and close to 80 targets, which is an insane workload. But Ben, I know today, and I have a prop that we'll hit on, I'm not high on Ezekiel Elliott from a fantasy standpoint. I think there's a bet that I'm going to hit the over on, but I'm not too worried about efficiency in that front. Is there any way that Elliott ends up actually, and I shouldn't say any way, but if in the event that Elliott ends up being in the optimal tonight, how does that happen?
I think it'd have to be a low scoring game, first of all, because if the Bucs get moving, this is really going to put a tremendous strain on Zeke. Now, does he have an additional out where he can catch the ball? He does. His receiving prop is at 3.5, so it's not possible, but that's also where Pollard kind of excels. And I think that Dallas wouldn't hesitate to go to him a little more often. The problem is, it's not just that I think that it'll be more, I'm not going to say a timeshare, that it's not going to be a workhorse situation. You already mentioned this, but Tampa's front, nobody runs on them. This is not a spot where it's like, oh, I worry about volume. I also worry severely about this matchup. So you add that to almost a double-digit spread. I just don't know how often Zeke is going to be able to get, 20 carries or something like that. I really don't see that happening here. he can still get it done, but you're paying an absolutely massive premium on him salary wise. And that makes it a tough sell for me.
Fair enough. Just one last thing. Zeke ran 450 routes last year. I don't have routes per dropback, but 450 routes to Pollard's 81. And that's a lot. So do I think Pollard gets involved? Yes. I do think might be a little bit overblown that this could be anywhere close to a timeshare. The guy's not even halfway through a massive contract. He's the third highest paid running back in the NFL. Wouldn't you just want to wear him out? I mean, like, wouldn't you just want to run the guy till the wheels fall off?
There's something to that. I'll just say this: to begin the season last year, Pollard carries 2, 2, 0, and 3. To close the year, 11, 12, 9, and 5 with 5 targets in that last game. So
lost season, no Dak. I don't know.
No doubt, but I think they liked what they saw late. I don't think it was, let's see what this guy's made of. I have a feeling he's part of their plans more and more this season.
Gotcha. Cola. I agree. That's what I think too. And by the way, Adam Diesel, is that it? Adam Diesel. Welcome to Team Awesemo, brother. So do you think there's any value in looking towards a Tony Pollard today then, Alex, in large field tournaments?
Yeah, I think he's kind of like a fringe play potentially. He's kind of expensive on DraftKings, so like I think you're probably better off not playing him on there. On Fanduel at 5,100, kind of maybe a guy that could be the last guy in, but there are a lot better options today.
All right, then Alex, talk to me about the pass catching options here because it's very spread out, which makes it kind of interesting. Amari Cooper, 8,400, and we can go back and forth. Of course, on FanDuel, you've got the MVP spot and 4 flexes where you have Amari at 12,000, and then you're not paying that premium on any. It's 1.5 times the points, but not 1.5 times the salary. So really, you're just looking for the guy with the most points. Not Chris Godwin. I'm sorry. You have Mark Cooper and then CeeDee Lamb at 10,000, Gallup at 9. So they're really close. But over on DraftKings, you've got Ezekiel Elliott and CeeDee Lamb very closely priced, $200 separated, and then all the way down another 1,000 to 6,200 for Michael Gallup.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because 2 years ago, Gallup and Amari Cooper were almost on par with each other. Last year, Gallup took a big step back where he was only targeted 17% of the time he was out there, while Cooper and Lamb were targeted about 22% apiece. And Gallup's efficiency went way down. So just not a great year last year for Gallup. He's definitely third on the list for me by a significant margin, but since it's DFS and their salaries, definitely someone you can consider.
All right, Alex, is there any way you can move that mic a little bit closer?
Yeah.
Perfect. I want to hear you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Gallup to me is just one of those guys, Ben. I was very high on him coming into last season, and it was underwhelming to say the least. But the guy is always on the field. He's going to play like 95% of snaps again this year. He's going to always be in play. Is the price point here enough to look at him and say, you know what, Gallup could be a really strong option tonight, especially if Dak is playing from behind?
I think he's definitely in play in that sense. He's also, sub 5% right now in terms of a captain. He's going to be an against the grain type player there. And I get it. Listen, Amari Cooper has established himself as a top guy there, and CeeDee Lamb, rightfully so. I don't have to, if you've watched any of the shows I've done with you, Luffy, over on the Fantasy Football channel, I know how you feel about CeeDee Lamb's prospects heading into the season. So I get he's on the field a lot. He's competing against some big time players for target share, but there's no doubt in a 1-game sample size, a guy like Gallup could break 3 for a couple big plays.
And I know, Ben, that they talked about maybe moving CeeDee Lamb around, and I think that would make sense. But let's just assume that this insane defensive front for Tampa is getting the Dak early. They're without Zach Martin, right? Like things could get a little ugly for this offensive line. CeeDee Lamb lined up in the slot 93% of the time as a rookie, and he's going to play way more snaps than he did last year as a rookie. It feels, and by the way, I don't hate CeeDee Lamb. I think he's going to be phenomenal. Just so you know, that was tongue in cheek. Maybe CeeDee Lamb really benefits from that tonight.
Very, very possible. I mean, I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be a very popular choice tonight for good reason. He's dynamic. They want to get him the ball. They can get him the ball in space. He's someone that I feel pretty comfortable with the floor. And it leads into, we got a super chat. First one of the NFL season from Charles asking about cash games. And I think that kind of goes into what you were saying with a guy like CeeDee Lamb. Certainly the quarterbacks, you're going to want to lock in that floor. I think of all the pass catchers, though, they will make sure that CeeDee Lamb is busy tonight on that front. And that really helps when you're talking about double ups, 150-man contests. You can build towards the salary in terms of using all your cap.
Alex, if you were to rank the wide receivers today for Dallas, how would you do so? Obviously considering salary cap and just overall roster construction.
I think Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are about as close as it gets. I see Amari Cooper is slightly more popular tonight, so maybe a slight lean towards Lamb. I do agree. I think that he'll be even better this year because last year he didn't play as many snaps as you'd expect a top wide receiver to play. And then Gallup is a pretty distant third.
Do you envision yourself having lineups where you have, Dak at quarterback and then a number of do you think you'll have any Dallas onslaught lineups today? Of course, I know you build a lot of lineups. It's a lot different than someone that's just playing like a 3 max, but
Yeah, I mean, like the games that Dak played last year, he threw for like 300 plus yards like every week, it felt like. So I'm not quite expecting that tonight, but I'm thinking 300 yards might be about where he averages, which creates a lot of different ways that multiple receivers can get there. So if you have Dak at captain, especially, you're anticipating that the receivers for the most part do well, but not break the slate. Otherwise, you'd want them at captain. So I definitely want multiple receivers if I have Dak at captain.
I guess the only thing for me is, Ben, can we see a scenario unfold where Tampa goes up very early? There's a Ronald Jones touchdown, and then there's a Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, but the ball's spread around, then a Gronk or whatever. It's 28-7. And then Dak resorts to what Alex was saying, first 5 weeks of last year. And if that shoulder's okay, is just second half insane numbers, useless numbers, but insane numbers nonetheless, that get you where you need to go with that onslaught. Because I think that is actually feasible.
Oh, no doubt about it. I think that's possibly probable. If you look at the spread, that's kind of what Vegas is saying may happen.
The only reason I say possibly feasible is because I do have a ton of respect for Tampa's defense.
I do too, but even a really good defense, they're going to be willing to concede, bend don't break style. If they're up comfortably, Dak could really pad the stats. The other thing to point out, I don't think certainly I'd be pretty stunned if Dallas is trying to run him intentionally. And I do think there's a chance that Dak is more one-dimensional, particularly early in the year. So if you're really going to go with that onslaught, you need the receivers even more, because I'd say it's even less likely for Dak to get there rushing than it normally is, because he's coming off major ankle surgery, of course.
Thank you for the super chat, TF. He just sent us a super chat to say, love you guys. So excited for the season to start.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Love you too. Blue Apples with the super chat. Would you want to have Tony Pollard in one of your lineups? You never know. It's better to be safe than sorry. I guess it depends on how many lineups you're playing, right, Alex?
Definitely. Right now we have Pollard at 13% ownership on DraftKings. So it's not like he's going to be like super contrarian tonight. So for that reason, I feel fine fading him, but it's showdown. You can play pretty much anyone that'll be on the field.
I don't imagine we have much interest in the Cowboys defense. What about kickers here, Alex? Greg Zerloin.
That's your wheelhouse.
Yeah,
I heard someone pronounce. I'm self-conscious because I've always called it Greg Zerloin.
I mean, how can you fade a guy that's nickname is Greg the Leg, right?
That is
so.
Be better if it was Greg the Third Leg, and you're like, what, that guy's got it. But yeah, I think I've been pronouncing it wrong all these years. I'm bad with kickers. I don't know most of the kickers in the NFL right now, to be honest with you.
Oh man, kickers, they're great every showdown slate because people hate rostering the kickers, and they provide a steady like 7 to 10 fantasy points. which isn't great, but it can easily crack the optimal lineup. So basically what you're hoping if you take a kicker is they outscore the next guys on the list in salary. So that'd be like Tony Pollard, Dalton Schultz, the Bucs defense. If they start to outscore more and more of those guys, there's a higher chance that they'll be optimal.
Ben, could you name every kicker from the NFC South?
What? I mean, every kicker from the NFC South. I don't know if I can name any kickers in NFC South. Young Hoo Koo and is Graham Gano still there? I seriously doubt that, right? He's on like 8 different teams.
I don't know, but that's a solid guess right there.
Yeah,
real solid guess.
Actually, it's easier than now that I'm thinking. Like Will Lutz is still in New Orleans, right?
Is it Lutz?
He's on the IL. You gotta brush up on your kickers, man.
I can only do so much around here. I've been on the college football streets.
Well, the Bucs have a new kicker every 3 weeks. It feels like. Yeah.
I still thought it was Grammatica from like 20 years ago. So I don't know. But I think the point to make with kickers, you have to again start backwards. If the total amount of fantasy points in the game is much lower, then 7 to 10 points could be huge. Now, if the game is 48-40, it's really hard to think that even with all the extra points, they're going to get there because there's so many yards, there's so many touchdowns. But in a really ugly game, 7 to 10 from a kicker could absolutely crack the optimal.
Our boy Terry McBride says, for my Showdown Groups article, free on the site, go check that out at awesemo.com. And while you're there, use the promo code DAK, like the quarterback playing tonight, DAK. Get yourself an Awesemo Plus Express Pass, NFL, for $1 for the week. I mean, you can't beat it. It's got projections and ownership and rankings and everything. All of our Showdown and single game content is included in that for $1. You're playing tiers. We have ownership and everything included for that. If you're a season-long player, we got waiver wire tools now. We've added all of that in, the start sit tools, rest of season projections, and so much more. And all this stuff is built by Awesemo himself and used by Awesemo himself. So it's good stuff. $1, promo code DAK, awesemo.com/promos. And no joke, there's a lot of other stuff that's included in that I can't even think about right now. And we don't even have time to go over it. So check it out, awesemo.com/promos, promo code DAK, $1 for all of that for the week. Test it out. There's nothing to lose except $1, but I don't think you will. Anyway, 720. That's good. Terry said 35 of 95 winning lineups featured at least one defense, but only 2 of those featured both defenses. 29 winning lineups featured at least one kicker, but only 2 of those featured or both. Only 8 winning lineups included at least one defense and one kicker. All right, good to know. Thanks, Terry. I didn't know that. Solid research. Tampa Bay Bucs. Let's talk about it. And I want to start off with this, Ben. Stephen Leibowitz, who is one of our friends here in chat at Awesemo, mentioned, he's like, if you're running a Tampa Bay onslaught, does it make sense to consider? Sorry, I was checking my spot in the queue. Nowhere close. 10,000. Does it make sense to consider? Why do I even look? Does it make sense to consider Tampa Bay defense in some of those? Like a 4 and then a 1 defense and then 1 Cowboy.
So I think an underrated strategy, it may seem counterintuitive, is if you're going to play the defense, you go to the onslaught of the other team. Because realistically, for Tampa's defense to get there, they probably need some turnovers, maybe some pick sixes and stuff. That's going to get Dak back on the field. It actually hurts Tampa's offense. So I almost like to run like a I don't know if I go this aggressive, but say a Cowboys onslaught and then the Bucs defense.
I see what you're saying there. I see what you're saying. Yeah. What about you, Alex?
No one's going to do that.
No.
Yeah, I think defense is always pretty interesting. So what I'm looking for from the defense is really like, what is the sack potential? What is the interception potential? So I think Tampa should be a little bit better for sacks than picks because Dak's ball security is pretty decent. So I'm not really like super keen on the Tampa defense today, even though they're big favorites. Although the Showdown, I think I might lean towards the kickers tonight.
How are you approaching the running backs here? Because you have Ronald Jones, who I found it interesting. If you look at his rushing attempts prop, it's a lot higher than Leonard Fournette. So despite what we saw Leonard Fournette accomplish in the playoffs last year, Vegas at least currently has this as Ronald Jones getting, I won't say the bulk of the carries, but a significant majority of them. And you have Fournette, who was the predominant pass catcher last year, but still dropped a lot of passes. And then they brought in Giovanni Bernard as a free agent coming from Cincinnati. It stands to reason that they did that because their backs were so bad catching the football out of the backfield last year. So break this one down for me, Alex. What are we seeing here?
I think this is a full-on committee between the three guys. Now, Ronald Jones had that finger injury last year in the playoffs, so he got kind of deprioritized, and Leonard Fournette was the lead back. But now that everyone's healthy, I think that it might kind of revert back how it was before. And then let's remember that Shady McCoy was the third down back in Tampa last year. He got kind of deprioritized throughout the season, but Giovanni Bernard is just slotting into what McCoy was doing. So if we look at the early season numbers from 2020, I think that's going to be our best estimate of what's going to happen at the start of 2021.
Ben, talk to me about Rojo, Leonard Fournette, Gio, who's very cheap. Like, is there an out there with Gio? I heard you make a great point on the odds show, on the betting show today over at the Awesemo odds channel. Check that out. Go over there and subscribe. It's awesome. If you like betting as much as we do, and you like listening and talking about this stuff as much as we do, check out the odds channel. Amazing content, brand new channel on the come up, one might say, with Ben Rasa and Matt Kajeski heading that up. Two sharp minds. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it. Check out the betting show from today. I think there's one tomorrow as well. Awesemo odds channel right here on the YouTubes. I heard you talk about something really interesting with Jones, which I totally agree with. And it was mostly like, hey, Jones could have 15 yards today, or he could have 140 yards today. You just have no idea.
Point I wanted to make. This is perfect. This is a guy that I'm taking some shots with at captain specifically. He's going to be one of the lesser owned captains out there. Last year, he had 5 games under 25 yards rushing. No show. He also had 4 games over 105 yards rushing, though. So the boom bust is there. And when you're talking about Showdown, if your guy is horrible and he's non-existent, if he's your captain, you're dead. If he's in your utility, you're also dead. So it doesn't really matter in large field tournaments. A guy like Ronald Jones, he had a 99-yard touchdown in one of those games. He's an explosive runner, and it seems like when he gets going, they're apt to let him go. The problem he runs into, if he fumbles, if he misses an assignment, they're quick to yank him. But I'm going to embrace that variance tonight with him. I think he is an under-the-radar captain play that could have a really big game tonight.
I like it. And as our boy, of course, I'm a Tulsa dog, knows very well, right? I actually think that Ronald Jones is good. It's just, and the stats bear that out. It's just, if the opportunity isn't there, it doesn't matter if he's good or not at all. So, Alex, if you were, I know you see things as a full out committee. If you're looking at this game, is there anyone that you prioritize in the backfield if you had to?
That is, I think I'm going with both Jones and Fournette. I don't think Bernard is going to have a big enough role to really be fantasy worthy today. In fact, my bet of the day was betting under 9.5 rushing yards for Gio Bernard. I have no idea how they come up with these lines, because McCoy like averaged like 3 yards a game last year or something. So I'll be surprised if he gets more than one attempt, but we'll see. But one thing I'm doing that I feel like might be kind of under the radar is stacking Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. I think what we see in committees is they try not to give one guy like 25 carries. They try to spread it out. So I feel like there's going to be some connection between how many carries each gets, where if the team rushes a lot, they're both going to get to eat.
Charles says, what would you guys say is the safest, and thanks for the super chat, captain in one of those double ups? Would you be going cheaper to be smart to, or would going cheaper be smart to shove in Dak and Brady? Ben?
I see what you're saying there. Yeah, I mean, if you can lock in points, I don't mind that. Getting both quarterbacks is good. Kickers, if you think it's going to be low scoring. Just guys, you really want to build more towards the floor. I wouldn't get crazy at captain. You still want to make sure you've got a guy that's guaranteed to get some usage, but I don't mind that strategy in double ups.
And Alex, apparently you put J1875555 in the poorhouse by recommending a $400 steakhouse in Chicago.
Sending him to David Burke or what? Where were you going?
I think Jay knew what he was getting into when he asked where to go for a steakhouse in Chicago.
Yeah, to be fair, like if you ask for a steakhouse, and thanks for the super chat, Jay, he's saying he's trying to recover some money from that tonight. If you ask for a steakhouse in the city, you don't want someone to give you shit. Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
You go Applebee's sounds good. Come on, you can't do that. But good luck. And Anthony Davis coming in hot as always, man. One of our most amazing supporters. Sorry, two-part question. Thanks again, Anthony. Viable to fade Dak and Brady in a lineup together? And if so, would you also only play them in MVP? Fanduel question. Wait, viable to fade Dak and Brady in a lineup together? And if so, would you also only play that? I don't understand the if so part. Do you?
So I think he's saying that if you fade one,
He's saying, would you fade both?
Yeah.
Anthony, re-ask that question and I'll for sure get to you. Jordan, just pay attention to that in chat, please, because he just hit us with a solid super chat.
To answer the first part of that question, like, would you fade Brady and Dak in the same lineup? I think like you got to play one of the two, just because it's really hard to picture a scenario where like both passing offenses are duds and like there's enough players of other positions that put up scores.
Gotcha.
There's also no opportunity cost. You're not paying for in terms of, MVP over there. It's not the same in that regard either.
We are at 1,550 viewers. You guys are the greatest. Almost at 300 likes as well. Thank you. It's a fun show, man. First game of the season. Ben, wide receivers, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown will very likely be the death of me today. His ownership did come up considerably, but his captain spot projected ownership is still very low. This is a guy who in the 8 weeks he played last year with Mike Evans and Godwin, mind you, he only played one game the previous season. That was in the beginning of the year. Last year was a COVID year, all of that crazy stuff. He just joins the team, jumps into it. And by the end of the season, over those last 8 weeks, he was tied with Mike Evans for targets. Granted, Mike Evans played only some of that last game and actually ahead of Godwin. Not as much air yards, a lower ADOT and all that, but Antonio Brown was squarely involved in this offense pretty heavily. And I think that speaks volumes to see how much involvement he had on a high passing volume offense, despite joining the team in week 9.
No doubt about it. I'm on him with you. Bet him. I know we're going to talk props. Just over 4.5 receptions is one I did like. They can get him the ball in space, get him involved. You can look at things two ways. If you're the only good receiver on a team, you're going to have a massive target share, but it's going to be wildly inefficient. Dallas's defense doesn't have the luxury to key in on him. They've got to worry about Mike Evans, Godwin, the tight ends, a lot of other places. So I think Antonio Brown, another against the grain captain, if you want to go with, Bucks heavy, him and Ronald Jones to me are two of my most important pieces tonight.
What about you, Alex?
So this is something that you kind of raised to my attention in one of your shows. I think that Antonio Brown, like in week 17, like he got a lot of his production and there was some like incentives that he was trying to hit, and it was pretty much a meaningless game for Tampa Bay.
And Mike Evans also didn't play most of that game.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that was like 1/4 of his targets all like regular season. So I'm kind of like, okay, I think like he looks good, but I'm not quite buying into those full numbers. The main thing I'm concerned about is the playing time in games that mattered. He played around like 50 to 66% of the snaps, and that's just not enough playing time to be an elite fantasy player. But if that changes, you're earning somebody's past Evans and Godwin, then it definitely could happen.
Yeah, and look, I don't anticipate it being every game because you have Godwin, you have Evans, and that's tough. But he did have other games of 8 targets, a 13 target game, 6, 7, with a couple big plays and a score. So I don't look at Antonio Brown as someone that doesn't have a ceiling. But I also don't disagree that last game certainly skewed the numbers a little bit, but it's not like he wasn't involved. And jumping into the season in week 9, now you have a full off season and all of that. I think it can make a difference. He is 33 years old, but for me, it's just a pricing thing, Ben. And then you get into guys like Godwin and Mike Evans. They are definitely expensive, but of course, Evans is going to be more of a threat in the red zone, outside receiver, a downfield threat. The huge, massive splash play is there for him. But I won't lie. I did think it was a little bit disconcerting to see, how many underwhelming games Mike Evans had last year as well. He's also boomer bust on this offense. Everyone is, because it's spread out.
Oh yeah. I mean, every big play weapon on the Bucs will have a couple weeks where they're non-existent. It's just a product of how the team is constructed. Now, anyone who watched the show last year knows that I always lean to Chris Godwin, and it never works. Him and Mike Evans are just, it's like the Metcalf Lockett thing from Seattle. I just never get them right. Evans certainly is more primed to snag, a couple touchdowns on inefficient target share. Godwin probably needs more volume, but listen, if you're playing Brady, you're going to be able to rotate. Obviously, you're going to want more than one pass catcher in a lot of those lineups.
We got Live Before a Lot coming up after this as well. Greg Ehrenberg, Eric Linkwood is going to take you all the way up till 8:30 p.m. I mean, we just got it happening tonight. It's nowhere else, nowhere better to be. It's who? Oh, Matt Gajeski and Greg, right? Greg and Matt. Okay.
Eric's in Italy running amok. So.
Oh, that's right. That is absolutely right. That's why Jordan's the best producer. Alex, what are you doing with Evans and Godwin? And we could talk about Rob Gronkowski as well.
Yeah, I think Evans and Godwin are definitely top plays on the slate. It's kind of weird tonight because there's about 4, 5, 6 players that are all in a 2-point fantasy projection range that all I think are comparable. So Evans and Godwin are probably at the top of the heap there. Godwin's efficiency last year was insane. He caught 77% of his passes, 13 yards per attempt. So that's amazing. And then Mike Evans gets targeted a little bit more. So that kind of evens things out between them.
All right. Super chat from Deion Jackson, Madden PS4. Any ideas on the kick returners tonight for both teams?
No.
I don't. It's not a crazy question.
No,
but,
use the defense then.
Right. But it's just so hard with the new rules to return kicks for touchdowns. I mean, punts maybe, but to return kickoffs for touchdowns is I'd love to know what the percent of kickoffs returned for touchdowns are since they implemented the new kickoff rule, the new touchback rules.
Yeah, I think you definitely want the punt returner between the two. I guess I haven't been brushing up on those rates either, but the problem is unless it's someone that's already playing a significant amount, 7 points isn't really going to get it done. I think actually they only get 6 points for the return touchdown. So
right, no yardage or anything.
Yeah, you need something on top of that.
Yeah, it's the defense, like Ben said, but even that, it's the Anthony Davis. Okay, he said not playing them together. Sorry, I didn't mean fade. And because of cost, would you only play Dak and Brady in the MVP? So basically, if you're playing one of them, are you only playing them in the MVP?
Not necessarily. I mean, if you're playing for one side to dominate, then say I'm playing a Bucs stack, I could have Antonio Brown at MVP and Brady with no Dak, and that's perfectly fine. So I do think Fanduel skews things towards playing the quarterback in MVP because it's 0.5 PPR. And right now we have Tom Brady at 27% captain ownership and 39% chance of being the top scoring player. So make sure to check out that Top Showdown single games plays page. So I actually think Tom Brady and Dak are very strong captain plays or MVP plays on FanDuel, even though the ownership is going to be the highest.
All right. Now, Ben, we've mostly covered these teams. I just want to make sure we're covering all of our bases here because like we've said so many times, these showdown slates can get kind of wild. Are there any peripheral guys, dare I say tertiary options that could be viable today?
I mean, there's always guys that, their outs are they're going to get 1 or 2 targets. They're not going to have a high snap count. You need to make the most of it. I think OJ Howard's interesting because before he got hurt, he was, an actual player, focal point in some regards, a factor in the passing attack. How he'll mesh with Gronk, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows, though. So that's the type of guy you're hoping to luck box into a touchdown, similar to the tight ends on Dallas. Low percentage play, but I don't think that's crazy, particularly, again, when we're speaking about this, I'm envisioning the large field GPPs where you're really trying to sacrifice logic for just being by yourself. Because if you're isolated and you hit one, I mean, it'll pay for the rest of your showdowns forever. And that's what you're really after.
Dude, Alex, it's going to suck so bad if Cameron Brate and OJ Howard are getting targets. Like, it's just going to be brutal.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we got to expect because, Gronk isn't the same kind of tight end player he used to be. I prefer Howard because he got targets the whole season where Brate was kind of deprioritized when the 3 of them were healthy. And I just want to mention some news I just saw. Noah Brown is inactive for Dallas. He had a COVID case recently, I think. So he was on the COVID list, but they thought he might play this game. That means that pushes Cedric Wilson and Simi Fehoko up a spot. So they're active. They could be like some deep dart throws if you want to really have a $200 player in a million maker lineup.
What about Jarwin?
Yeah, Jarwin is solid. I think from what I've heard, like they're gonna play about the same amount. So they both look like decent options, but nothing that's gonna blow you away.
Yeah, Ben, tight ends for Dallas, pretty much just dart throws at this point.
Yeah, I think you can play them. You're hoping that their 1 or 2 targets result in a fluky play. And we've seen, crazier things than that. You still want to have some method to your madness, though, because if you just start clicking things with no logic whatsoever, you get into a lot of trouble.
The Dak Prescott NFT drop over at Eternity Chain tonight takes place at 9 p.m. Yeah. Narrative?
I think not. You in that one?
What's up?
Are you going to snag one?
It's not a drop. It's just all straight, either buy or auction. And gotcha. The Messi one went for like 1.5. The 1 of 1 Messi went for $1.5 million. So I'm priced out. Wow. But no, there's a lot of other ones you get. They're kind of cool. I don't really want that one though. Anyway, what do you guys say we hit on some props, some bets, make a lineup, and then turn this over to the live before lock crew?
Sounds like a plan.
Maybe we should do it. I should also mention that our sponsor, No House Advantage, you've heard me talk about this site a lot because they're good and there's like a legit edge playing there, which is kind of important. Bringing you an entirely different way to enjoy and play DFS. Player prop contest for NBA, MLB, PGA, but what we care about, NFL, right? That's what we care about right now. It's 100% peer-to-peer. It levels the playing for someone changed this whole read up since last time I did. Fuck the read. No house advantage. If you haven't played there yet, there are a couple of things that are huge. Number one, and Ben points this out all the time, completely static props, right? There are other sites where you're playing, the props are moving all the time, right? They adjust throughout the day. If you're getting in on something early and then some news breaks, or you just have a read that it's going to change, that is huge. You can get on it early. Not to mention, you can compare it to other books. Look at other books, see where they're at compared to No House Advantage. It's a huge, huge advantage playing somewhere like that, where there's just like, you have to find the small edges that you can get these days. And a lot of people have done it with No House Advantage. And if you use the promo code Awesemo, you get a $25 deposit bonus when you sign up. If you download it in the App Store, you can go online, you can do it in the Google Play Store, wherever you want. But Ben, we said it a million times. That's the biggest thing, is the edge comes from the static props and being able to take significant advantage of that every single day.
No doubt about it. It's a site that's obviously on the rise, and you have opportunities there to pad your bankroll. You're taking the same information and research. You're not doing more research by playing over there. The same things you're doing for props and for DraftKings and Fanduel, you can incorporate into your No House Advantage lineup. So no reason not to have that on there. We were killing it at NBA all year. NFL is going to be the same story. So absolutely get over there, use that promo code. You get a little extra bankroll to start.
Use that promo code Awesemo. Get your $25 when you sign up. Take advantage of all of the edges to be had over there at No House Advantage. Michael Perlman, thank you for the super chat. Welcome to the team. You said first year with you guys, loving it. Let's go. Thanks, brother. All right, let's hit some bets. Let's do it. Some props. I'm going to go around the table first. I'm just going to ask you straight up, Alex and Ben. I'll start with you, Alex. 9.5 points here. 9.5 points. Tampa's laying 9.5 at home. Where are you at on that?
I mean, it sounds pretty sharp. Like, I think everyone kind of thinks that Dallas is going to have a little bit of trouble putting up points, and Tampa's coming right off that Super Bowl win. So I'm looking at some props to get my edge tonight.
What about you, Ben? Just as far as the sides go here, any lean whatsoever? Because I'm kind of with Alex. I don't feel good about either side of this.
No, when it was at 8.5, I honestly thought the move was using Tampa in teasers to cross 7 and 3 because you create a lot of value there. If you wanted Tampa, the time to do it was when it was hovering around 7. I would never bet them now. No chance I bet Dallas. So straight pass on the side of this game.
Okay. Any lean on the total for either of you guys? We can go to props. I'm just curious where you stand here.
Be under for me. Just first game. You know, I always tend to think the offense is maybe a little sloppier. Dak coming back. I could see, you know, they staying in the 20s.
Anything on the under or over total, Alex?
I always like me at under. So just because I know like the public likes expecting the over. So I do feel like the lines are usually a little bit slanted towards the over. 52.5 is a pretty high line, and Tampa is not exactly a gunslinging offense. Like, they averaged only 7.4 yards per pass last year. So that's not making me feel confident that this is going to be a shootout.
Okay. Well, let's hit on a couple props here. Have some fun with this, and then we'll build a lineup. We still got, 5 minutes? So we'll build a quick lineup. We'll hit on a prop or two each, and we'll send everybody. Well, no, not stay right here because Live Before Locks coming up next. Ben, you know I was on Zeke over 13.5 rushing attempts. Even with them being big dogs, I'm different than you guys. I still think he gets the lion's share of work. But I will also go Tony Pollard under 8.5 yards longest rush. It's already the best run defense. I think he gets swallowed up. And I think if he is used, it's mostly as a third down back. I don't think he's going to get many opportunities. So with that in mind, I don't mind taking the under on most Tony Pollard rushing props. What are you doing today, Ben, as far as props go in this game?
I like that. That echoes what Alex was saying about Gio Bernard. I feel the same way for both of them. They're going to contribute more in the passing game. I shorted Zeke. I know that seems kind of obvious, but his rushing prop, it was, the 55 to 57.5 range. Anything in that, I feel comfortable because A, I don't know where his volume is going to fall, and B, even in volume, I think that the Bucs front seven is going to dominate them. We didn't really talk a ton, but Zach Martin cannot be overstated. He is one of the best guards in the entire league. He is not playing. That is the run creator for them. So I shorted Zeke. I think that it's just not going to happen. I know the line has been enticing. It has risen a little bit. I was at like 53.5, I believe, earlier. But if you get it over that, I'm going to take against the grain and go under.
How about you, Alex?
So the ones I'm looking at here, I feel really, really confident about the Gio Bernard under. I like the Pollard under as well. But I just don't feel like Gio Bernard is going to play enough to get 9.5 rushing yards. So I hammered that one. The other one I'm kind of intrigued by, but I don't feel quite as confident, is Scotty Miller under 8.5 receiving yards. Like, I know you guys are probably watching this being like, what the heck? These are like the dumbest lines, like 8 yards. But I just saw, I mean, Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson are like really fighting for scraps with the playing time here with Antonio Brown, Godwin, and Evans. So I don't know exactly how the snap counts are going to shake out, which is my source of not as much confidence, but there is a potential that Scotty Miller does not play very much at all.
All right. We are 46 likes away from 400. help me get me to 400 so my wife doesn't divorce me and take the kid out of embarrassment that I couldn't get us there on opening night. I mean, it would mean a lot to me, and it would, save this household. All right, let's do it. Build a lineup. Captain spot. I'll go to Ben. Throw a captain in.
Well, that was a mistake going to me first.
Large field tournament, by the way.
I'm going for it. Ronald Jones. He has an opportunity tonight. If he gets going early and Tampa's winning, I think he dominates the backfield.
Okay, and we're using Lineup Builder. It's on the site. I believe, Alex, that Lineup Builder Lite is actually part of the Express Pass, right? Where if you get for $1 using the promo code DAC.
Definitely, yeah. Lineup Builder is our hand building tool, and this kind of gives you feedback about your lineup and how you're doing. So it's always fun using.
All right. And go to Awesemo_com on Twitter. We're giving away $1,000 yearly annual Awesemo Plus Pass, every single sport, every bit of content we have on the site. Just follow the rules on the graphic. It's super simple. And follow Alex while you're there at Awesemo, Awesemo DFS, Ben at JazzRaz DFS, myself at Laffy_D. 720 says, save Laffy's family, smash the like button. That's right. Rally behind Laffy. I don't want to be on the streets. All right. Ben, who did you go with?
Ronald Jones.
Okay, so that makes for an interesting build here now because we're going running back at the captain spot. Alex, go next.
I think I might go with Fournette here because if we're projecting a lot of rushing attempts for Tampa, I think it's going to be split pretty evenly.
We've seen tournaments taken down with multiple running backs from the same team before in Showdown, so I dig it. I'm going to run it back the other way. This is tough because you're two running backs, a lot of time of possession there for Tampa Bay. I'm going to go on the opposite side. I'm going to go Dak. Ben?
All right. Well, if we've got Dak in there, I think realistically, we know we're going to need a Dallas pass catcher. I'm going to go to CeeDee Lamb.
Okay. I like it. And we're about up against it here. We've got 84.50 remaining per player, Alex. We're in a pretty good spot. What are you doing here? Just out of game theory, how do we approach the final two flex spots?
Oh, man. I love me a kicker, but if we go with Ryan Suckup, that only allows us to really get Brady or Evans because we have so much salary left. So I'm going to I think we got to go a little bit higher. This is where it gets tough. So, maybe. So if we go with another Dallas guy, that kind of makes sense to me. Gallup, I guess.
All right, throw Gallup in, and then Mike Evans. Leave 1,500 on the table. D. Owens real quickly, Ben. In Jones captain used Tampa D or Cowboys run back for utility.
Is that a question or a statement?
I'm not sure. But maybe the guys afterwards coming up. And just very quickly, because we had another super chat. I think I'm leaving between 3 to 5K on the table. Is that too much? Snap answer, yes or no, Alex?
No, in Millie Maker, yes, otherwise.
Yeah,
okay, Ben.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Okay, that'll do it for us, guys. Thanks as always for hanging out. Greg, Matt, coming up next, taking you up to 8:30. It's been a blast as always. Let's kick the season off in a big way. Win some money. We'll catch you back here next time on the Deeper Dive. Peace.
I joined you with this Geo prop.
are here. It is the first NFL live before lock of the season, and I'm here with Matt Gajewski. We've done some, I think, one VOD together. We've never done an actual live before lock show. I have to be honest, I hate doing preseason content. I'm happy that I get to actually talk about real football. I don't have to pretend that I care about those shitty preseason games anymore. Matt, you and I get to talk about a showdown contest.
First of all, Greg, what is with the preseason slander? That's our wheelhouse over here with these unknown players, the unknown playing time. But you're on to something else. I'm really happy the regular season's here. We have real football. The showdown contests are awesome tonight, and I can't wait.
Yeah, there's going to be maybe a million maker. More likely, there's going to be a couple people splitting, winning a million maker up top. But who knows? We've seen crazy things, and maybe leaving salary on the table, that could be a potential option. We had a super chat that came in right before we got on. Maybe those guys touched it at the end, but I'm not totally sure. So I want to make sure we mention this. Sean McCarthy saying that he thinks he's leaving between 3,000 to 5,000 on the table. Is that too much? No, not at all. Particularly on a slate where, assuming you're playing in a milli maker contest where there's so many thousands of entries. If you're doing something to differentiate, one of the easiest ways to do it is leaving salary on the table. And I think the pricing is such that it's not really a massive issue. If you're playing cash games, then it starts to become a little problematic. But Matt, is there any kind of limit that you set to salary that you're willing to leave on the table?
There's no limit I set, but like you just have to be within reason. You know what I mean? Like 5,000 is probably plenty.
Yeah, and it's also, what is the opportunity cost? But for a lot of these guys, if you look at some of the pricing for today's slate, over on, especially if you're playing on Fanduel, he didn't specify whether it's Fanduel or DraftKings, but like CeeDee Lamb is 10,000 and Mike Evans is 13,000. And we have CeeDee Lamb as more likely player to end up in the optimal lineup in Fanduel in our projections. So, just based on that information, it's not crazy at all to leave salary on the table. And then, kind of similar story over on DraftKings. Michael Gallup is 6,200. Is it crazy to think he scores a long touchdown and ends up outperforming some of the guys who are priced above him? No, not at all. So I think that is one of the more reasonable ways to differentiate yourself in these massive tournaments is to leave some salary on the table. And by the way, super chats rolling in. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. Also, lots of football content coming up on the channel. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And beyond that, Matt Gajewski does a great betting college football podcast, Betting You, with Ben Rasa. If you guys are into college football, you should be checking that out. If you guys aren't into college football, you should be checking it out anyway, because you probably like making money. And that is something these guys do very well, is giving out the best college football picks. Super chat here from Charles in Canadian money, it looks like here, if I've translated that properly. Saying, hey, Greg, I'm doing a few large double ups to help build the bankroll. What would a safe captain play be? He said he thinks he's going to Geo. Not Geo, but I'll ask you, who do you think is the safest captain play tonight, Matt?
I think it's Brady. Just price per dollar. He is the highest projection. He's on the team that's an immense favorite. Dallas's defense doesn't scare you whatsoever. So kind of all lines up in a great spot. Projections there. I'd go with Brady.
Yeah, for sure. If you look at our projections, something I really like to use for building showdown lineups is if you go onto Awesemo.com, we do have the top showdown single game plays tools. And, it's based on simulations and our projections, what players' odds are of being in optimal lineups, what their odds are being in optimal utility spots. And we have Brady in the optimal lineup nearly every single time. In the captain spot, he shows up optimal 26.4% of the time. He's one of the top 2 to 6 scorers on the slate, 67.9% of the time. He's probably the player most likely to land in the optimal lineup. And then on top of that, you're talking about cash games and safety. That's really where I think that Tom Brady has to come into play. Now, Solo, you're putting me in a little bit of a bind here because the sponsor of the show is No House Advantage. He's asking a prize picks question. So that's a little dicey. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that, but you left a super chat, so I'm going to answer. But first, I'm going to have to shout out that today's show is sponsored by No House Advantage. If you guys are new to No House Advantage, head on over to the site. Use the promo code Awesemo when making your first deposit. Get a $25 bonus on that first deposit. Now, as for prize picks, I'm going to get back to that in a second. I have to pull up the projections on the site because I was not ready to answer a prize picks question when No House Advantage is sponsoring the show. But by chance, did you check it out, Matt, before I pull these up here?
Yeah, I kind of have a prize picks tab open. It's funny, since we've been sponsored by them, I've gotten really into prize picks. One I like in particular is just kind of leveraging these Tampa Bay pass catchers. You can do the same thing with Dallas, but I like the Tampa Bay side a little bit more. They're basically all projected within 2 yards of each other. Godwin and Mike Evans both sit at 60.5. With Godwin, you just have a slightly larger sample of having the larger target share in the offense. So anytime I can split those hairs with literally the same projection on no house advantage, I'll take that. So my favorite one is Godwin with the over. I believe he asked for 5. I don't have 5 off the top of my head, but that's my favorite.
Yeah, and I would agree with that as well. And then just in fairness to the sponsor of the show, my favorite overall play over on no house advantage. Mike Evans is oddly projected with an over-under of 6.5 receptions on no house advantage. And basically, if you look at most sports books, he's somewhere around 4.5. So 6.5, that is a very high number. If you look at our projections, we have that with an over 30% chance to hit the under there. So under 6.5, would you agree that's pretty reasonable under there?
Yeah, for sure.
And then the follow-up to Soldob's question, who is our favorite FanDuel captain, which, by the way, we're going to be talking about captains as we move along as well. But overall favorite captain, if we're just talking about safety, it's once again going to be Tom Brady. If you look at our projections, we have Tom Brady with a 39.4% chance to be the top scoring player over on FanDuel. Dak Prescott at 25.1%. So quarterbacks are really eating up the likelihood of being the top scorer. To you, would you agree that just kind of in a vacuum here, Tom Brady overall top captain, what do they call it? Captain play on FanDuel?
Yeah, for sure. I'm playing cash on both sides. Brady's in the captain slot for both.
All right, so there we got some super chats there. If you guys have more of them, any questions in the premium Slack chat, for sure, at me in there, and we'll be answering any questions that come in. But that aside, let's start digging into some of the nitty gritty of the slate. And we talked a little bit about Tom Brady. I think everybody knows our opinions on him. And then, Dak Prescott as well is also going to project really well looking at the quarterbacks here. So neither of us are going to argue that the quarterbacks are two of the top plays on the slate, but I'm going to ask you, how high of a priority is it for you to get the quarterbacks into the lineups, and how often, if at all, over the course of your lineups, are you looking to fade them?
It entirely depends on field size. Small field cash games, I'm just locking in both quarterbacks for the most part, unless you start to get with, a few more entries. Once you get into the large field tournaments and stuff like the Millie Maker, looking more to get away from quarterbacks just because they come with that ownership. And the projections we have right now, they're both at 15% or higher, with Brady pacing the slate. And with quarterbacks, especially ones that are really pass heavy like Brady in PPR formats like DraftKings, if Brady has a really big game, just because of the point per receptions and touchdowns, how they're distributed, the 6 points for receivers, 4 for touchdowns, there's a reasonable chance that one of his pass catchers outscores him in the captain slot. And I know each of these teams has 3 premier weapons. Their target distributions are a little more spread than teams like Seattle or Minnesota, things like that. But you still could run into a circumstance where one of these receivers outperforms the quarterback just the way everything is scored.
Yeah, and by the way, just some stuff here that we're getting some stuff in the YouTube chat. Sean V, a guy, he's always coming in, he's sharing his opinion. Sean V, he's making it back into the football streams. He's always very prevalent in baseball streams. He insists that Tom Brady is absolutely not going to be the winning captain tonight. Listen, maybe not. I'm not guaranteeing it. I just think he's the most likely based on our projections. But something that was kind of interesting is I saw that Nolan tweeted this out, and it was some research that him and Kyle Dvorak, who you did a bunch of shows with him, was doing shows with us last year, and a lot of Showdown contest shows that he did with me. The quarterbacks are not overall the most likely position to end up being in the captain spot, but I still do view them as the safest. And on the whole, they end in the optimal lineups a whole bunch. Generally, there are times where we could see, wide receivers or running backs. There's a little bit more upside there. But in terms of just likelihood of individual players, Tom Brady's still fairly likely to land the optimal lineup. But it's not any one thing where I'm saying that he's guaranteed. But for cash games, I think you put him in there. But we do have another super chat here from Nick the Picker, who was also watching the show earlier in the day, a buddy of mine on Twitter. He's saying that he loves the Bucs today to win by 1 to 13 points at plus 140. And he also likes OJ Howard for over 19.5 receiving yards. I'm going to ask you, what do you make of OJ Howard over 19.5 receiving yards?
I think that one is a little thin. At very best, he's 4th on this team in targets. And that's assuming that he plays the same time as Gronk. And I don't know that that's a certain either. I think a reasonable expectation for OJ Howard is he's probably the 5th pass catcher in this offense, and that's a little uncertain. So not only do they have to be playing with that right game script, everything has to be going your way. They're moving the ball through the air, but they have to get to that 5th option enough times for him to pay off that 19. So it's not my favorite overall, but I don't hate it either. Just kind of middling to me.
Yeah, it's one thing that I think is a little hard with some of the receiving props for the individual Bucs players. They have so many weapons in that offense, and I just don't really know where the target's going to go to. Then you also have to consider the game script of the game. The Bucs are favored now by 9.5 points, depending what book you look at. There's a chance they don't have to throw the ball a whole bunch in the fourth quarter. And maybe that is something that makes people a little wary of rostering Tom Brady as a captain today. But some of those individual receiving options, and I throw Gronk into that boat, OJ Howard, Antonio Brown. I just don't know where the targets are going to be going on a week-to-week basis until we get situations where guys are getting hurt or stuff like that. I think it could be a little bit difficult to really confidently say which guys we want to bet on over receiving yards props, but probably about a fair number there. By the way, we have a very important question here, Matt, from Mike Peterson in our premium Slack chat. He wants to know how many super chats we need to get tonight to watch you hook up your TV on the show.
Right. So I actually have a TV now. That's a funny question. This goes back to our Christmas stream last year when I did the tour of my apartment. There is a TV in here, but my apartment is so small that when I want to eat, I have to bring the microwave out, put it on my counter, and then put it away when I want to watch TV. So right now the microwave is out, the TV is put away.
Oh, the people, they're very in on your personal life. Something for a show from nearly a year ago. Mike is remembering that. We also have a couple other questions in the Slack chat, and we could transition over to the running backs now. We talked about the quarterbacks. I think we both agree they're very strong plays today. Smokey's asking, would we play Ronald Jones in cash games today? And I think that's a good way to transition over to the running back position. So I'll start by asking you the question here. Would you play Ronald Jones in a cash game?
He's actually somebody I thought about a lot. I played around with a couple cash builds. He projects very well for his price. And it's not just our projections too. If you look at like sports books, he's projected for more work than Leonard Fournette. And again, it's kind of a fluky thing right now. We're not entirely sure how this backfield shakes out, but it's just a pure price play. You're saving a lot by going down to Ronald Jones. He's not that much more expensive than the kickers. And just the way projections are done, I think you get a lot of suck up in optimals because of the total overall and how much they're favored by. But Ronald Jones is close. Do you have a strong lean in that situation? Right now, I'm leaning towards suck up over Jones, but he's at least in the conversation.
I think for cash game, suck up might be a little bit safer just because I think Ronald Jones is going to get the bulk of the carries at running back, even though we do have Leonard Fournette as being, a decent amount more expensive over on DraftKings. One thing that did kind of put a little wrench in the plans is as of a couple of weeks ago when I was looking at the slate, because there's only one regular season slate up that's upcoming when it's a couple of weeks ago or starting to look at that, is I didn't think Giovanni Bernard was going to play. So there was some VOD stuff that I did a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it's like a week and a half ago at this point, where I thought Ronald Jones was a great play just based on the fact that it looked like Giovanni Bernard was banged up with an ankle injury, wasn't going to be up there. Now we've got Bernard, Ronald Jones, and Fournette all going to be getting touches in the backfield. Of the three of them, Jones is my favorite tournament option. But for cash games, I think we could reasonably say suck up just because I think the floor is higher.
I agree. It's hard because the team total is so high. So Jones is going to see some work. His yardage is going to be fine. And then I think if he falls in the end zone, he probably outscores suck up. But again, he's going to be splitting with Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette had a huge goal line roll down the stretch last year. These things aren't guaranteed. So right now I'm leaning slightly towards your side with the safety and suck up.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at. Tournaments, though, I slightly do prefer Ronald Jones. But let's talk about these other running backs while we're on the position. What do you make of Zeke Elliott this year? Because I am a little concerned what his workload is going to look like this year. Because while he didn't play well last year, and I think that a lot of that could be attributed to Dak Prescott wasn't there, the offense just generally sucked. He was outplayed by Tony Pollard for, a large stretch of the season. And I do wonder a little bit, did Pollard play well enough to take away some snaps away from Zeke? Not that Zeke isn't still going to be the guy for them, but it just might not be the same amount of overall snaps that he played a couple of years ago. And the other thing to consider also is just where his price point is today, 9,600. I think I'd rather play pretty much all the other receivers to Elliott, but is there something I'm missing here with Zeke?
No, I think he's a great tournament play for all the reasons you mentioned. There's definitely a ceiling for touches. I know Pollard did outplay him down the stretch last year, but they are still very committed to Zeke. Everything they suggested in the preseason, like he didn't play a single snap. And you had a lot of starters playing for Dallas in the preseason, and he was just completely on ice getting the starter treatment. He's going to receive a huge workload. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same as it was like pre-Tony Pollard on the roster, But the concerns with Zeke are they're big underdogs. Do they have to turn to the pass? He is active as a pass catcher, but it just kind of takes away that ceiling from a scoring perspective. There's kind of a touch squeeze on both ends from that perspective, where maybe if Tampa Bay is up by a lot of points, like the spread suggests, Zeke doesn't get the full workload. If Pollard takes on even just a little bit extra work, that could hurt his bottom line. And when he's projected in the same range as some of those elite wideouts, like you said, Zeke doesn't make my cash build, but he's a very good tournament option for that reason.
Yeah, and overall, on the whole, he does seem to be shockingly popular. We're currently projecting him for a total of nearly 50% ownership. And, it's a number I'm going to be underweight to the field on. So in terms of Zeke, clearly there's upside if he's able to return back to that role he had a couple of years ago. But that number of around 50%, is that a number you're looking to be over or underweight to?
I'm going to be a little underweight on Zeke.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I said also. So I'm going to agree with you agreeing with me. And then talking back about these Buccaneers running backs, to me, Ronald Jones is my favorite of the group. We talked about him a little bit before as a potential cash option. Both of us slightly preferred Ryan Suckup. But between Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, Giovanni Bernard, which of the Bucs running backs is your favorite?
It's Ronald Jones, and it's mainly because of price. Again, like bookmakers are projecting Ronald Jones to lead this backfield in carries. Most of the props are favoring him, rushing yards, everything like that. And you have him at a cheaper price point than Leonard Fournette. I know Giovanni Bernard is going to be playing on third downs, and that has value in PPR scenarios. But again, Tampa Bay is projected to win this game by nearly 10 points. How many third downs in hurry-up situations is Giovanni Bernard going to be on the field? So he's kind of that distant third option. And then price is what really does it for me, bringing Ronald Jones into the equation.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. I mean, the price tag on Leonard Fournette is just off to me at 7,000. There's so many players that I'd rather get to than him. A lot of it's due to price. A lot of it's just due to workload concerns. I think that Ronald Jones is going to be the guy who gets more of the touches in the backfield. And then Giovanni Bernard is somebody who I just don't even have in my player pool. Maybe if he was 200, I would consider him to be a little bit more viable. But coming off that ankle injury, what kind of a role do you think Bernard is going to play?
I think he's going to play his normal third down role. And you would consider Giovanni Bernard, I think, in lower risk contests because of his price. And there's probably not much of a ceiling there. Like on the goal line, are they going to use Giovanni Bernard over Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones? I would say probably not. But even in the preseason, we saw Giovanni Bernard getting most of the work on third downs. At his price, if you're captaining somebody like Tom Brady, he affords you salary to jam in a lot of other studs. And in GPPs, I think there's a lot of ways you can work around this, but especially with a Brady or a Dak, one of these expensive captains, I think Giovanni Bernard gives you that kind of just point security, those PPR points. Even if they're playing from ahead, he's going to see some third down looks.
So is the game script not really a concern for you? Because it was something I considered a little bit, is if Bernard's going to primarily be the pass catcher, is there going to be a need for him if the Bucs are up by like 7 to 10 points?
Yeah, but I mean, like they have to get there first. And presumably they have some third downs throughout the game. Even if they're up by 14 and it's a third and middling situation, you're probably still looking at a pass. So Giovanni Bernard being on the field in those situations, I think does give you some security at his price. Now, I don't think there's a ceiling. In tournaments, he's probably somebody that I don't want to play a lot of, especially because we are projecting him for decent ownership for his price, like 12%, 13% total. That is pretty decent for a 2K back, especially one that I don't really view as having much of a ceiling unless the game script completely flips and Dallas gets up in this game. So in lower risk contests, I'm okay with him. In tournaments, I think he's somebody I want to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's all reasonable. And get ready, we're going to be talking about the wide receivers next, because that is kind of what I feel is going to make or break this late. And I also think that is the most tricky position to break down in today's game. But first, guys, football season is back. If you're watching today, I'm sure you are aware, but that is what is on the ad copy in front of me, and I felt inclined to read it anyway. But we have a brand new deal over at Awesemo.com. That is, if you want to get in on an NFL Weekly Express Pass, it is only $1 to open up the season if you use the promo code DAK. That is DAK, as in Dak Prescott, starting quarterback for the Cowboys. And we have a lot of new stuff in our Express Pass this year. It is going to include access to our premium Slack chat and everything we have to offer for Showdown single game contests. It's a really good way to dip your toes into the water to open the season, and it's only $1. So promo code DAK, just $1 to get access to the Awesemo Plus NFL Weekly Express Pass. So are you ready to talk about these wide receivers, Matt? Because I think we're going to need your help guiding me a little bit here.
Yeah, man, let's break it down.
All right, so let's start with the Cowboys situation. We've got CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper at the top. Who do you think is going to be the number one receiver for Dak Prescott this year?
I think it's Amari Cooper, but I think it's really close. And we've seen CeeDee Lamb emerge in this offense. I think he is somebody who takes on a larger role this year. Most games last year, Amari Cooper had the edge in snaps, CeeDee Lamb playing in the 60 to 70%, so a little bit lower. CeeDee Lamb was primarily a slot receiver, and I do think the COVID-restricted offseason hurt a lot of rookies last year, CeeDee Lamb included, but he outperformed Gallup. So I think we're going to see Amari still operating as that alpha, but it's going to be close with CeeDee Lamb right behind him.
So I'm going to have a non-take. I don't think people have to be an Amari Cooper guy or a CeeDee Lamb guy. I think that right now we have them projected extremely close over on, and their price is really close on DraftKings too. 8,400 for Lamb, 8,400 for Cooper, 8,200 for Lamb. Over on Fanduel though, where CeeDee Lamb is 10,000 and Cooper is 12,000. That's where I think just the pricing makes it so I'm going to have to lean more towards Lamb. But in general, I think if you're playing a bunch of lineups, you don't have to take a stand. Just split exposure to both. That's really what I'm leaning towards doing here.
I'm with you, especially on Fanduel. The pricing difference is a lot more drastic. And like if you're playing multiple lineups, this isn't a spot where I think you're taking your stand.
Yeah, there are other spots that we could take stands, and one of them could potentially be playing one of these guys at a captain spot or something like that. But I don't have a real strong lean in between who the guy is going to be here. So I say play some of both of them, and both of them have a lot of upside, and there's a chance both of them could go off also. I think particularly the game script of this game, Dak Prescott should have to be throwing the ball quite a bit. But now I'm going to ask you, going down, I know you mentioned briefly Michael Gallup there. Obviously a big play receiver, probably the biggest boom or bust option we have in this entire game, because it certainly feels like Michael Gallup is the type of receiver who he's not going to get targeted, 8 to 10 times in the passing game. He's most likely relying on one or two really big plays. So what do you make of Michael Gallup, and do you view him as a boom or bust option?
I do. There's some weird rhetoric coming out of Dallas in the preseason that they plan on moving Gallup in and out of the slot a little bit more this year. Then in preseason play, we didn't see that whatsoever. But again, preseason play are really small samples. These Tampa Bay receivers these Dallas receivers weren't on the field together much. So I don't really want to put too much stock in that, especially when we've seen CD play a lot of that slot role already. But with Gallup, he comes down to a price play. He's on the field still almost every snap. This Dallas offense is largely dominated by 11 personnel, so 3 wide receiver sets. Even when CeeDee Lamb was coming off the field last year, they were putting in Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown. So it's basically 3 receivers on the field at all times. And you have Michael Gallup playing over 90% of the snaps often, nearly every single game. His target share is a little lower than the 2 aforementioned receivers in Cooper and Lamb, but just the fact that that Dallas is going to be throwing as much as they are with him on the field, there's a chance that he puts up a big score comparable to Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. And there are situations where he even outscores them. This is something I like to do in large field tournaments, is look at the captain ownership of some of these third options. And Gallup, for example, looking at our ownership projections on DraftKings, comes in at 4%. If you captain a wide receiver 3 like a Michael Gallup at 4%, you don't have to get as crazy with the rest of your lineup, which is something that I want to stress. We talked about like leaving 5,000 on the table. We have 3 really clear receiving options on both of these teams, and it's spreading ownership at the captain slot a little bit. Playing somebody like Gallup in there and then getting a little bit contrarian rather than leaving like 5K or more on the table makes sense in certain contests.
Yeah, that was actually going to be a follow-up I was going to ask you, since we both agreed that Gallup is boom or bust. His range of outcomes, I think, is the widest of any player in this game. I kind of think that makes him an appealing GPP option. He's only projected for 2% ownership in the captain spot on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, he's projected for, where is he? Less than 1%. So it's really hard to have a lineup that stands out on a single game slate, especially when there's this many entries in the contest. I think Gallup is one of the ways to do it. His likelihood of success, it's not high, but the times that he hits, I think it's going to pay off in a pretty significant way due to his upside. So if you're looking really off the board for a contrarian option, I think that he is somebody to get to. Now, any of these other cheap Cowboys receivers draw any kind of interest for you for really dumpster diving?
Not in large field tournaments. I think you can take shots on like the Cedric Wilsons of the world, but those are reserved for like Millie Maker type scenarios. In any sort of medium to low risk contest. You're not taking a look at any of these guys. The tight ends are interesting between Jarwin. Like Jarwin, I think a lot of people just expected to come back and take over this role coming back from injury, but Dalton Schultz has played really well in the preseason. It looks like that's going to be a split potentially down the middle. If one of them ends up catching a touchdown or two, that's a situation where you could flex one of them. But overall, I think there's better price adjusted place for your low risk contest. But, you know, Showdown, I mean, in large field tournaments, if someone's going to be on the field, you have to at least think about them.
Yeah. And once again, I think this is a slate where there kind of are cheap options. Like we mentioned, we're going to mention the kickers in a little bit. I think that they're both okay plays. We mentioned Ronald Jones. He's being cheap for running back, who's going to be on the field for a lot. Transitioning to the Bucs receivers, Antonio Brown, to me, that's just a ridiculously cheap price tag. He's overall my favorite value play on the slate. So there isn't really a pressing need to go to these guys for like $1,200 or $200 or anything like that on DK. And then Fanduel, it's also really hard to get production out of the guys who are, you know, 5,000, 6,000. So moving over to those Bucs receivers and what I said about Antonio Brown, do you agree with me that he's the overall best value play on this slate?
100%. When I was running optimals earlier, like the second most common player, I guess the third most common outside of the quarterbacks was Antonio Brown. And it's mainly a price play. Like he's behind Evans and Godwin in target share, especially excluding like that crazy 15 target game he had where Tom Brady just got him to his contractual bonus for having a certain amount of receptions in the year last year that happened in their final game. But he's slightly behind Godwin and Evans, but not far enough where we see like a warranted price gap this far. Like where Antonio Brown is for his target share in the offense is just downright ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is look at the other guys who are around him in terms of price. Michael Gallup is an upside play at 6,200, but at least if you're looking to play cash games, there's so much more safety in Antonio Brown. Some of the other guys around him, Ronald Jones, he's going to be splitting touches with Giovanni Bernard and Leonard Fournette. So if you have the money, you certainly pay up for Antonio Brown. I think Antonio Brown is a must play in cash games today on DraftKings.
Yeah, he is. He's a good value on FanDuel as well. Not quite the same, but he's still a very good play over there.
Yeah, and then over on FanDuel, I think we should briefly talk about him as well. 9,000, I still think that makes him a very desirable play, but a little different without the PPR points. And also we have CeeDee Lamb at 10,000, who I think is a better play, at least on a points per dollar basis, than Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I think FanDuel's pricing is a little softer today. There's really easy ways to get them both and like play your QBs.
Yeah, so Antonio Brown, I think to me, he is the safest option. Then looking at the top, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, talked a little bit about the presenting sponsor show, No House Advantage, and how I think that Mike Evans under 6.5 receptions is one of the strongest plays over on No House Advantage. By the way, if you guys have not checked it out, head on over to the site, use the promo code Awesemo, get up to a $25 bonus on your first deposit. But between Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, how are you handling these guys in tournaments?
It's really similar to the receivers at the top for Dallas. You have a very tight target distribution. It's going through 3 players, which makes them all a little more unpredictable, but any of them could pop up for big games. I like them in captain slot for that reason, and none of them are getting egregious ownership for that reason. They're all hovering between this 8 to 10% range. None of them are higher than 9.1, none of them lower than 8.0 outside of the wide receiver threes, Antonio Brown and Michael Gallup. But if I'm splitting hairs, it's going to be Godwin just because he's had the slightly higher target share in this offense. And again, it's literally splitting a hair. These two guys are both fantastic.
And by the way, also an update on No House Advantage sponsoring. There's a ton of overlay on the site right now. I just got a message about that. So if you're looking for a way to get, a lot of positive EV, especially on single game tournaments, one of the easiest ways to do that is with overlay. Also over on Awesemo.com, we do have free projections for No House Advantage, which makes it pretty easy to go over there, build lineups, prop-based contests, and you could just look at some of our projections on the site, and you could see that something like I mentioned Chris Evans in terms of his receptions, we project him to go under that by a pretty good margin, and we also have an optimal lineups page, so pretty easy. Go over to Awesemo.com and build lineups for No House Advantage, and there's overlay, one of the best ways to find any kind of value in DFS. But if you're going to roster one of these guys, Chris Godwin versus Mike Evans as a captain, which one of them do you think is more upside?
Man, it's really hard. I think they both have really high upside. Again, I'm going to go with Godwin just because of the target share.
Yeah, I think that is fair enough. For FanDuel, I would lean towards Mike Evans, even though he's at a more expensive price just because of the touchdown equity and the red zone targets, because the PPR bonus on DK, but I kind of led you on a little bit here because I'm splitting it. I made you pick one, and I'm picking both of them, but on different sites. But I'm hosting. I'm allowed to do these things. But FanDuel, Mike Evans would be my choice because I think he has a little more touchdown equity. And then on DraftKings, I would lean towards Godwin just because of the PPR equity. So there we go. I cheated, but there's my answer. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, Evans, he had a 23% target share in the red zone. Godwin, 15%. Their ADOTs are different. Evans, 12th ADOT. Godwin's at 10. So, I mean, theoretically, it leads to more upside, but I think it's pretty high for both of them.
All right. And then once again, if we do have to roster the dredges of the cheap wide receivers on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is there anybody that you might want to get to in a large field tournament?
Not really, but it's an interesting situation because they draft like Jalen Darden. He should be their backup slot. They have another player that played a lot in the slot, and Tyler Johnson. He's on the field situationally. Again, those are milli maker plays I'm not even looking to. If there's like 100,000 entries or more, then maybe, but even then I think you could get weirder at captain and have a more conservative build that's more viable than getting to those guys. But if they play a snap, you need to consider them.
Yeah. And then once again, there's only so many ways to differentiate in a large field GPP. Don't go crazy with these guys, but if you're somebody who plays mass entry, mix some of them in. And I don't think it's a bad idea to get some of these guys into a couple of lineups, but let's move over to the tight ends now. And I know earlier in the show, we did get a super chat asking about OJ Howard and over under for 19.5 receiving yards. Both of us thought that was a pretty fair number. But when we talk about all these receiving options the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have, we've already gone through the wide receivers with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, crazy underpriced on DraftKings. I don't really know what to make of the tight end situation because last year, Gronk played decently at times in the playoffs, but in the regular season, he was kind of a non-factor in a lot of games. Probably the most surprising thing about the season to me was that he stayed healthy. He didn't get hurt at all. But I think this is a team that has the big picture in mind. They're not playing to, just maximize their potential in every regular season game. I don't think Gronk is going to get a massive workload in the regular season when you consider that OJ Howard barely played last year. He's back in the picture. Antonio Brown wasn't on the team for all of last year. He's going to play a big role this year. I just don't know how many targets there are to go around for these tight ends. And that kind of makes all of them thin plays to me.
Yeah, and you're going to be playing with 3 of them. So, OJ Howard's back from injury. He didn't play at all last year outside of the first couple games.
Yeah, and once again, it's still. Let me refresh this to see what kind of ownership we're getting on Gronk today. But at least last I looked, he was fairly popular. It's not like he's some low-owned pivot play. We've got Gronk over on DraftKings right now. He's projected for 14% ownership. That's a lot for a guy that I'm not really convinced is going to play a big role. Gronk, to me, is kind of touchdown or bust. Over on FanDuel, he's projected for 10% ownership. That, to me, is just a really high number and something I totally want to stay away from. But is Gronk making it into any of your lineups?
Yeah, he's in the larger field stuff, again, similar to some of the receivers there.
Okay, and then in terms of OJ Howard, is he somebody you're mixing it at all?
Yeah, these guys are just like pure flyers. They're when they fit, but they're not in many lineups.
All right, and then moving over to the Cowboys tight end options, we've got Blake Jarwin as one potential option. And is there either of the tight ends here that you actually think are going to play a sizable role? I think the last I looked at our projections we had, it was really similar. I think it was like 30 receiving yards for Blake Jarwin and projected 22.5 for Dalton Schultz. Are either of them to you somebody you do think could potentially stand out as being a tight end one for Dallas this season?
No, I think they split the role. So you're banking on like who scores the touchdown, who gets randomly the higher target share in a game. They're in play for these like lower volume, I guess, bigger upside tournament kind of options. Like if they score touchdowns, they probably outscore the kickers. If they score and like Ronald Jones doesn't, there's a chance they outscore him. But again, these are large field tournament plays.
Yeah, and even then, I mean, certain ones like talked about Gronk on the other side. He's still kind of popular, which to me is something that's just not deserved ownership. Currently on FanDuel, we have Blake Jarwin and Dalton Schultz. Neither of them are really projected for any ownership. Over on DraftKings, let's see, we've got Gronk, by far the most popular tight end. Jarwin only projected for 4% ownership. Dalton Schultz 3%. If you had a lineup and somebody said you absolutely have to play tight end today, somebody says, listen, Jordan's been kidnapped. Producer Jordan's kidnapped. The only way we're letting him go is if you get 10 fantasy points out of your tight end today. Which tight end are you picking, assuming you want to save Jordan?
I'm going to pick Gronk, but I don't feel good about it.
All right. Sorry, Jordan, you're done. That's there's nothing we can do about it. The tight ends kind of suck today, but that's all we can do. That's what your kidnappers wanted. We do have another super chat here from Charles, once again in Canadian money. He's got the fun colored money here, and he's asking one more question. He has Brady as captain, and then he's got Dak, both kickers, Brown and Godwin. Would you swap a kicker for Jones or a Dallas receiver instead of Godwin? All right, so let me think about the overall construction of this slate.
You should be able to fit Gallup in that lineup.
He's got Brady as the captain, Dak, both kickers, Brown and Godwin. Do you swap a kicker for Jones or a Dallas wide receiver instead of? Were you able to figure out the math on that really quick?
I've built a lot of lineups. I have lineups that look similar to this. You should be able to get Gallup in there.
I like that you've built enough lineups that you just read a super chat and you feel like, I know exactly how much salary you've left over, and you could be able to get Gallup in there. But
like it'll be,
yeah, so
if you can't, like, you have to make a concession at one of the wide receivers, but you could get like really good receivers in that build with Tom Brady as captain. I've made them.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to talk about the kickers in a second. So I guess this is a good bounce to put also. And by the way, Charles, both kickers I think are fine value plays. If you have the ability to get to Gallup, that is something I certainly prefer for large field GPPs for the upside. But in terms of the kickers in this game, how are you handling them for tournaments?
For tournaments, they're a little lower upside. Like you really need game script to be a little weird. I like kickers more in lower scoring environments when you have like totals in the 40s. This one being above 50 makes me think there's going to be more touchdowns. When you have touchdowns scored, kickers generally aren't going to get there in the optimals, but you do have situations, where teams get stopped in the red zone, they kick a bunch of field goals, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the team that's projected to win the game either. Like Greg Zuerlein for Dallas, he's a phenomenal kicker. We know that. If Tampa Bay is the team that stops Dallas in the red zone and they just kick like 3 long field goals, he is live. I would never play him in the captain slot is the caveat. They're fine flex plays. I like them more in low risk contests, but never captain.
Yeah, and by the way, we just had, where is the note that Terry put in the YouTube chat? Oh, here we go. Lineups including 2 kickers won just 2 times in our 95 point sample size from 2019 to 2020. It's not, if you're looking to win a GPP, it's not a very likely outcome that you're going to get kickers in both those lineups. Something that happens, just slightly over 2% of the time. But if you have to roster one of these kickers, just because of the projected points in this game, I would go towards Ryan Succop as being the safer play of the two. Although for tournament purposes, nope, I would still go with Succop for tournament also, because him and Zuerlein have similar ownership, and considering how much higher we have Succop projected as likely to be a top scorer, I think Succop is the better play over Zuerlein.
I agree with you. It just comes down to the total in the game.
Yeah, and once again, if you look at overall our projections right now, using the DraftKings ones as a baseline here, Succop is a little more expensive, but I don't think the $400 is all that problematic. And at 4,000, we have Succop with a 16.1% chance to be one of the 2 to 6 top scorers on the slate. Whereas Greg Zuerlein at nearly identical ownership projected for 16%. He's only popping up in that same slot 7% of the time. So Succop is outscoring Zuerlein, about 2.5x the time with just 1.4% more ownership. So Succop is going to be the guy to go to there. If you guys have any questions in premium Slack chat, fire those in, because we are about to get to the captains in a second, which I'm sure is going to be a popular question that people are going to be asking us about. But before I do, just quick hitting on the defenses. Do you have any interest in either of them here?
Tampa Bay is a big favorite, and that's going to be mainly just because of the Vegas line. But defenses, you're generally getting, a little under-owned, I think, compared to the time they actually end up in lineups. The Cowboys defense is tricky. Like they're huge underdogs here. They're not going to get really any ownership whatsoever. But we see games go awry often enough where I think you should be considering them, especially in your large field tournaments. And it's strictly with the idea if this game doesn't go according to plan.
So then I'll ask you, just from a lineup building perspective, let's say you have a lineup that's in a large field GPP with the Cowboys. Just from a game theory perspective, like who else would you be pairing them with? Because presumably you're not going Cowboys with, Brady, Godwin, and Antonio Brown in it. So who are other players you'd be looking to pair with the Cowboys D?
Yeah. So one thing I want to point out again, like defenses don't project as well in these high scoring game environments. That makes them maybe a little more attractive in tournaments because subsequently you would feel like their ownership would go down if they score well. It's some unlikely game scenario. So the Millie Maker, that makes a lot of sense. But, like when you're talking about correlated plays, if you're trying to like tell yourself a story in your lineups, like running backs are going to correlate with defenses. In the worst case scenario, maybe you don't want to play like opposing quarterback against the defense because that's how they get there. The defense like draws a couple turnovers or something. But at the same time, if your defense is causing turnovers in like pick six situations, as we've seen year over year with Jameis Winston, that's not always the worst situation for DFS either. So defenses for me are kind of just playing them when they get in there, when they make sense. Large field tournaments for options like the Dallas Cowboys coming in as huge underdogs. But with the defenses, I'm not sure you need to worry about the correlation that much.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that would be obvious, I guess, Zeke Elliott, if I had to pick one player, just because presumably if the Cowboys defense does well, you would think there's probably more likely of a chance they end up winning that game, potential to be running out the clock in the fourth quarter. So Zeke is somebody who I think would look a little bit more favorable in that kind of situation, but something else to consider if you're playing the Cowboys, most likely going to be a pretty contrarian lineup that you have there. Now we could talk about some of the captains here. Just 5 minutes to go into lock odds. If you have not done it already, make sure you got those lineups entered in because the game's about to start. You don't want to be left without any lineups for the first game of the slate. That'd be a bad way to start the football season. We talked about at the top, Tom Brady overall, the top play, I think, for cash games. Both of us agreed on that. But if we're going to be looking at tournaments and let's say single entry in particular to start, because we did get a question about that in the YouTube chat. I mean, in our premium Slack chat. And I want to see who was that asked. So it was Teddy G 0213. He asked, who is our favorite MVP over on Fanduel? And he's asking for single entry GPP. Would your answer still be Tom Brady in that situation?
It depends how large the field is. So like we have single entries that are small, single entries that are massive. If it's a small single entry, fine. You can play Brady just fine. If it's like people, I think, get it confused, single entry versus like large field, small field questions. It's entirely dependent on the field size, not whether you have multiple entries or not. So if it's a large single field or single entry tournament, I would probably get away from Brady.
Yeah. And so then let's talk about some of those large field single entry tournaments. And we could do this for FanDuel and DraftKings. If you're going off the board, just going crazy, trying to capture as much upside as possible, while also being reasonable, who would you be your play on FanDuel? And then we'll talk about the same thing for DraftKings as well.
For me, it's going to be the wide receiver threes, your Gallups and Antonio Browns, the players coming in with around 5% ownership, the captain on DK and the MVP slot on FanDuel. They're on the field for every single play. They're maybe a little less likely than CD, Cooper, Evans, Godwin to hit that ceiling game, but being on the field that much gives them a reasonable chance. And when you're differentiated enough with that 5% captain ownership, I don't think you need to do crazy things like leave a couple thousand on the table, like maybe you would have to if you're running a Brady lineup. So I kind of like the construction you get with the wide receiver threes, saves you in salary, which allows you to build more of like a well-rounded construction and still be pretty differentiated.
Yeah, to me, the answer is Gallup. We talked about him a little bit before, and it's just there's very limited amount of ownership going there. He's somebody who I won't say it's likely, but for his price point and his ownership, there's no player who is more likely to break the slate than Michael Gallup. I don't think there's anybody else who's reasonable that we could look at like 2-3% ownership that could have, like a 60, 70-yard receiving touchdown. I think Gallup is the guy who's most likely to be in that kind of situation. Considering his ownership, if I'm going really contrarian in a single entry GPP, he is going to be my option there. Now, we do have a question from Swanson79 in our premium Slack chat. He's asking, any chance that we would play Fehoko in a DK large field GPP?
Sure. I mean, has to be the largest of fields. Like Fehoko maybe gets 5 snaps? Like, what would you put the over under as his snaps? Like let's look at Dallas last year. So towards the end of the season, we'll use like week 16, a competitive game. Gallup, 83% of the snaps, Amari Cooper, 73, CeeDee Lamb, 51, Cedric Wilson, 19, Noah Brown, 26. Those are the only receivers that played. Like, I don't think his ceiling is 19 or 26% of the snaps. I think maybe like 10% ceiling.
I'd said probably like 3.5 or 4.5. It would be a really low number. And honestly, probably the way he ends up being optimal isn't even because he does anything of note. It's probably just because you need the salary savings. Because a bunch of guys at top just go absolutely crazy. Like if Tom Brady has a big game, Dak Prescott has a big game, and each of them throw for like 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, then you have, Mike Evans catches a couple touchdowns, CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, you're just going to need salary savings somewhere. And that to me is where it becomes optimal. It's not because he goes out and has like 60 yards and a touchdown. It's just because you need salary savings because a bunch of other guys go well. Because, we've seen showdown slates in the past, more prominently for NBA finals types things, but it happens where somebody lands in an optimal lineup with 0 fantasy points. So to me, that's probably where he could potentially end up being optimal. But we only got a minute to go into lock here, Matt. Time went pretty fast here. Any closing thoughts for you as we enter the start of the football season?
It's just really good to be here. Thank you, everybody that tuned in. Listen to Greg, myself, all the other shows. I think we have like 3 or 4 shows covering a single game today. It's crazy how intense football is. And I'm just super excited for the season. Thank you guys for all being here.
Yeah, guys, thanks a lot. And by the way, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. There is going to be football content coming up every day throughout the season. Of course, Matt is going to be doing a ton of college football content as well. So subscribe and good luck tonight.